I'm Heather Enness, and I'm a dynamic positioning operator for an offshore drilling company, and I'm a qualified master mariner within the Merchant Navy.
So, what is a dynamic position operator?
Before I tell you what a dynamic positioning operator is, I'll go back a little bit. So, an officer within the Merchant Navy, you train to become an officer or a chief mate or even a captain. You are navigation officers. Now, a dynamic positioning operator is a specialism within that. You train to become a DPO, and it's precise navigation, it's specific navigation. So, like if you've got a diver down, you need to work the dynamic positioning desk. So you tell the vessel where you want to be, because you know where the diver is or the ROV is under the water. So if a wave knocks you off your set point, it can tell the range and bearing as to how far away you are from where you want the vessel to be. And so it then uses your propulsion to bring it back. And so, yeah, that's what I do. I operate a lot of screens, making sure that the vessel stays in a specific place, because it could be completely safety critical, especially if you've got a person under the water.
What would you say drew you to being in the Navy?
Okay, in the Merchant Navy, well, I was actually drawn to the Royal Navy first. I wanted to join the Royal Navy as an officer of engineering. 5 out of my 6 university choices were engineering, whether mechanical or aeronautical, or even one was mechanical with aeronautical. But my 6th choice ended up being Marine Studies Navigation at Plymouth University. They had 3 courses on the go at the time: navigation, merchant shipping, and ocean yachting. They're all very similar, but in second year you had a couple of modules that were just slightly different. Now, I got accepted onto the navigation course. I went to the preview day. I loved the city, loved the university, and they turned around and said, well, you could do navigation, but you could get sponsored and do merchant shipping instead. And of course, like, why would you not want to be sponsored through university? To get paid, to not have to have that massive student loan at the end of it. I still had a student loan, but that's long been paid off, which is more, to be said than some people, so, that's how I fell into it. I didn't know necessarily what I was letting myself in for. I just knew that I would still be getting to go on boats. And, the training sounded pretty awesome. Had I have known, possibly, that I was going to be doing a full degree with 2 MVQs on the side, not getting any holidays because I was doing short courses, and I'd spend a lot of the summer holidays and what have you at sea, it might have made me question it a little bit more, but it's probably a good job I didn't, just because, I've loved my career and where it's led me. I don't feel necessarily that I've got on as far in my career as I would have liked, but then I've had family. When I look at some of my peers who have had command as a master, either it's a guy and their wives had obviously had the children, or they don't have children. If they are the females, they don't have children, or they're only just starting to think about families, whereas I did it a little bit of a different way around.
So you're qualified now enough to be a captain of any ship?
Yes. So whilst heavily pregnant with my third, I decided to go for it. I made it my 2021 goal. Back in the January, I made it my goal that I was going to at least attempt my Master's Unlimited ticket. I got the sea time. I was able to send off my what's called my notice of eligibility in the March, and that then took a long time to get back, because what with everything with COVID and what have you, like the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, so the MCA, it's a branch within the government. They obviously, things just shut down, and like it suddenly became quite hard to deal with things, and they then had a backlog as well, which didn't help. So it took a long time for me to get my NOE through. So that got pushed back and further and back and back. And then in the meantime, we had, we decided to have a third child, and we fell pregnant. And so my husband was gobsmacked. He was like, oh, you're not going to still go for it? And I was just like, why not? It's my 2021 goal. He was like, yeah, but things have changed. Situations has changed. You're now working a little bit more, and you're working away and blah blah. And I was like, no, that's still my goal. He was like, but you're so heavily pregnant. And I was just like, it doesn't matter. I'm just at the very least, like, I'm going to give it a go. And so I did. Yeah, I just suffered with COVID. I couldn't find an au pair at the time to look after the children, so I could really get my head into the studying game. And I had so many like October weddings. It was all the kind of like the lockdown weddings that suddenly got shifted, and so week after week. So it's not even like I got to go do the studying at a nautical college, because that's what I was going to do, was go spend a month at a college and really get into the zone. But I couldn't find an au pair to look after the kids, and yeah, these weddings just put a stop to it. So I dedicated my November to just studying, and I got to the point where I was just like, I'm spending more time trying to find an au pair than I am actually studying. So I just had to deal with it, try and put the kids in as after school club just to give me those extra couple of hours. And I then also had a course. So I had a what's called a medical care course, which used to be the old ship's captain's medical. So because you don't always have doctors on board or medics on board, and you're not always close to land, so you do have to learn how to do suturing, giving injections, like catheterization. So you have to learn all that stuff. So I had that course in November, and then off the back of that course, not necessarily because of someone on that course, but I then got COVID. And whilst heavily pregnant, bumps out here, couldn't breathe, but blessing in disguise, it forced me to stay in the study. So, well, in the spare room, and so I just cracked on with revision, and yeah, I passed my Master Mariners. Well, like I say, my Mariners Masters Unlimited ticket. Was heavily pregnant, having just suffered with COVID. People thought I was as mad as a box of frogs, but I did it, and I was so pleased I did it. Goal done. And hopefully someone out there might be inspired by it. And I don't want to. I get called a role model all the time, and I shy away from that term because the only people who I want to be a role model for are my girls. And my boy, of course, but especially my girls. But there's a lot of young female cadets or even officers who see me, who see the fact that I'm a mum at sea, got 3 children, got my masters, whilst pregnant, blah blah blah, and so yeah, I guess it does come across as inspiring. But to answer your question, yeah, I'm a qualified captain, and I can be a captain of any ship of any size anywhere in the world.
What do you feel has been the hardest kind of compromise or price you've had to pay?
I mean, the compromise is that a good chunk of your child's childhood you're missing. That will always be the hardest part, or the fact that you've missed them start school, you've missed their birthday, you've missed, them doing their first walk, their first steps. Yeah, that's difficult. Of course, that's difficult. But you do have to be pragmatic about it. You're doing your job, and at the end of the day, I might work away. I mean, I've got a really good rotation, 3 weeks on, 9 weeks off. It's unprecedented. I get 9 weeks off that I get to be the person to take them to school, to pick them up, to not just shove them into after school club, to be able to take them to ballet. I get to do all that for 9 weeks solid. So 3 weeks away, yeah, it's a small price to pay. But I've always liked the fact that when I'm away, when I get home, I can see the tiniest of changes in my children. Changes that you will never ever see if you're working a 9 to 5 at home. And let's face it, if you're working a 9 to 5 at home, you know what? Kids in after school care, you pick them up, it's dinner time, bath time, sleep. So where's the quality time? Other than at weekends, but there's, parents are knackered by the time that they get to the weekends, or there might be yet another children's party to go to. So you're not actually doing the things that you want to get done, with your children. So yeah, it's a price to pay, but I would rather do that and have that 9 weeks of quality time and be able to see those tiniest of changes in my children. So,
Well, okay, so tell me about your last trip then. I mean, I haven't really got a question to lead you into it other than what was your last trip like?
yeah, my last trip was hard. The job itself was fine. I was on 3 weeks of nights, but I just found out not long before I went back to sea that my mum had been diagnosed with cancer. And so, and because it was so early days in the diagnosis, and we didn't know when she was going to start treatment, we didn't know the extent of it, we didn't know what stage she was at. There was a lot of appointments for her, and I felt guilty that I was away. It was hard being away. My emotions were running wild. And being on nights as well. I had to I had to set my alarm and wake up in the middle of the night, which of course was day, so that I could phone my brother and find out if what's gone on, what happened in that meeting, that appointment. And my colleagues, they could see things weren't right with me. At first, you try not to talk about it. You don't want to be a burden on them. But equally, knowing that I'm not the bubbly self that I normally am, they could see something wasn't right, and that made me more emotional, because sometimes I think I've always been a talker. I am an open book, and so when I suddenly retreat and don't want to talk about things, when I can see people know that I need to talk but I don't want to, it just makes me a ball of tears, and it makes me cry more. And I am an emotional cookie, as much as I'm a strong person, I'm an emotional cookie, and I don't know, I never used to be, but I think that's born from, I was at sea when I found out my fiance was killed in Afghanistan. That was hard. I was in the Falklands at the time, and it was actually New Year's Day, so we'd been out the night before in Stanley, and we were actually having a bit of a hair of the dog drink in the pub, and two policemen came in, and they had like a note in their hand, and they were like, is there a Heather Crosby in here, maiden name at the time, and I was just like, oh, we've been looking all over for you, we need you to ring this number. And that was brutally hard, and I got through to them, but especially in the Falklands, you can't it's not like you can use your mobile. You have to go through a whole rigmarole of trying to call home. And the number I called actually was the ship that I was on, and it was my captain saying, Heather, I think it's Afghanistan, I think it's Chris, you need to call this number now. And so I did, and it was a bit of it was mad, I had to call that number, and I got given some guy in, within the armed forces, and I was just like, I've been told to ring this number, and of course they've got, security issues, so they can't just give out information. Yeah, I could have been press, they didn't know I knew, who I was, and so I ended up having to call his mum's home and be like, what's happened? Please tell me he's alive. Please tell me he's just injured, really badly injured, or, and we'll survive this. No, he was killed, and it was horrible that, especially that it was New Year's Day, so I think ever since then, you become acutely aware that bad stuff happens when you're away at sea, and you can't just get off. I was in the Falkland Islands. There's not 15 flights a day from the Falkland Islands. Now, fortunately for me, there was a flight the day after, or 2 days after, so I was able to fly home relatively quickly. But you might not have that luxury. You might be completely deep sea, and you might suddenly get the news that your granny has passed away, or like your brother's been killed in a car crash. You don't know. But and so going back to this last trip for me, it was hard. It was hard to start reliving having hard information whilst at sea. Now I could have probably have come home, but the problem was, we just didn't know when the appointments were going to be. We didn't know what was going to happen when. So it was better that I just got through my trip, and then I had 9 weeks off, and I could be there for my mum. So yeah, very difficult, and it was like a roller coaster of emotions, because on one hand I was trying to keep my shit together and be happy and work as a team, work well, and, you know, not be the morale vacuum on the bridge, you know. But on the other hand, I just wanted to scream. I just wanted to scream and be like, that's my mum. So, but the team was so good, you know, like the guys all knew what was going on, and they were there for me. They made sure that I could go and speak to my brother if I needed to. They let me go off for half an hour just so I could go cry. They were just very compassionate, which is exactly what I needed. And I will forever be grateful to them that's, you know, that's how they were with me. They didn't have to be like that with me. They could have just dismissed everything and just said, do you know what, suck it up, chin up, you know. And I would have probably have given them grief if they'd said chin up to me, because I got that phrase when the day that Chris was brought home in a box, you know. He was my fiance. So, and you know, that to me was just heartbreaking that someone said chin up to me. So if anyone says that to me, I give them grief. But yeah, I will always be forever grateful of the way that they were with me last trip. And to be fair, I've got a few more trips, you know, where it's a long journey, the whole cancer, you know, like, and chemo sessions. So there will be many more trips that they will probably have to comfort me, give me a hug if I ask for one, make me a cup of tea, you know, and let me just have that time to just process, because, you know, it's hard when it's your mum. So,
has there ever been a moment when you've been in in either of these roles, either on the ferries or in doing the rigs and stuff? Has there ever been a moment where you're like, actually, maybe I shouldn't be doing this now?
once, only once, but once. It was Christmas, and it was when Olivia was, she just turned 1, so it would be Christmas 2019. And I was only away for a week, but it was the Christmas week. And whether it was because it was Christmas week, I'm not sure. You know, like obviously you've had the build up to Christmas, you know, like getting things ready, and then you don't get to kind of be there for the exciting part, you know. And my eldest daughter at the time, you know, she was that a little bit older, and so she was starting to get into the spirit of Christmas. But I was FaceTiming home, and my husband actually ended up telling me, you can't FaceTime home anymore, because my baby at the time, you know, she was, like I say, she was what, 14 months old. You know, it suddenly got to the point where she could hear mummy, she could see mummy, but mummy wasn't there, and she didn't understand that. And it only took a few months later when, you know, she started talking a little bit, and she, you know, she was like, mummy on boat, you know. And so it did change, and of course the girls have gotten used to it, and now I've got my son as well, you know, like, and he's coming up to that 14-month like age, you know. So is he going to suddenly not want to see me on FaceTime because he's going to suddenly have a breakdown because mummy's not there? I don't know. You know, kids go through the separation anxiety. But that was the time. It was that Christmas that I suddenly thought, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I had a look at some network marketing like things, you know, and but my love was always at sea. You know, I did try that. Obviously, we then went into lockdown, so that kind of all came unravelled a little bit, and I had to be at home because I had to be mum, and I missed being at sea. So I started picking up the freelance role. I went freelance, and I started picking up the occasional ferry job, whether with Stena Line or with P&O ferries, and I loved that. I loved being able to work on a ship for a week. It was only a week. Come home, and then I could pick and choose when I next worked. You know, I could say no to the jobs. I could tell them, you know, actually, I've got a wedding on that week, so I can start this date. You know, so that worked for us. That really worked for us, me working freelance. And I then did that for a fair while before I then had my son. So, and it was when I had my son, and back in March 2022, P&O did the sackings of 800 people. I wasn't affected by that. even though I did work P&O, because I was freelance until I was on maternity leave. But I had a lot of colleagues who were affected by that. And, even to this day, a year on, almost to the day actually, people are still quite not happy about it. And of course they're not going to be happy about it. So I had to find a different way to go back to sea. P&O was no longer an option as a job share basis. And it was then my husband who was just like, why don't you get back into the oil and gas industry? And that's when I got in contact and mentioned about this DPO pool, and that sounds like ad hoc work, what I could do would be more structured. And yeah, I fell in love with the industry all over again. Yeah, the sea is a funny calling. I can't explain it. I guess anyone who lives near the coast, they don't want to move inland, or or if they do, they suddenly realise the grass isn't greener and they prefer seeing the waves. So.
What do you think is the appeal that makes people want to be around? Because it's a big, dangerous thing, and it's dark and full of krakens and stuff. What is it about the sea? Do you think that really appeals?
It's the views. It's the sunsets. It's the time off. The money. That's it. You tell me another job okay, there are going to be other jobs out there, of course, there's not many jobs out there that you can have all that time off to have that quality time with your family. And yes, it's at the detriment of being away, but it's just a mindset. It's what you're trained to do. It's what you go and do. It's what you love doing.
So is there anything specifically about North Sea oil that you find appealing, or is it, would you work in the oil industry if you were, I don't know whether there are other oil fields really, but
yeah, there's all sorts. I choose to do the drill rig rather than the drill ships. I could, if I wanted to, potentially, if there was space, I could transfer onto one of the drill ships. But what draws me to the North Sea is the rotation. They work 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. The drill ships work 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. You've also got your travel days, like to places like Guyana and stuff like that, Canada. And 4 weeks, albeit doable, I don't want to do it. I want, the 3 weeks. 3 weeks is very manageable with a family. 4 weeks is just that little bit too long. Obviously, I would love it to be sunny all the time and not have a North Sea winter and get the fear of, the helicopters not running because of fog or trigger lightning, or it's just too windy and, of course it would be nice to be out at somewhere warm.
Do you ever find yourself out in those kind of North Sea conditions like this?
All the time. Yeah.
What's it like being on a ship when it's like properly, nasty?
Depends. It depends how safe you feel. Like on the rig, obviously, it feels quite safe. On the ships, when I was working on the platform supply, it could be ropey. Yeah, it could be brutal. And also being pregnant in a North Sea winter. Oh, that was fun. That was a first trimester, seasickness, morning sickness. You weren't sure what it was, but there was a lot of sickness. But that was, it can be fun, to ride the waves. It's nicer when you can see the waves. I know that sounds a bit weird, but like when it's pitch black, especially if it's foggy as well, and you can't see, then it's just the ship's just all over the place. You're corkscrewing almost, so you're not just rolling or pitching, you're kind of all over the place. But you find a comfortable heading, like you dog leg if you're going from A to B, you might have to kind of go A to B to C, to try and dogleg it. It's just because of the weather. But equally, if you're on supply, in terms of supplying the oil rigs, they're not going to work you. So you dodge, what's called dodging, or you put your head into the weather and you make it as comfortable as you can for the crew.
So there's never...
Or you go to shelter. Sometimes they release you and you can go to shelter.
So there's never a moment during hitting that kind of weather where you were thinking, maybe this isn't that great? Or...
Twice I've had it. Once the Bay of Biscay, where we had such a slow roll that every time you kind of went over, you felt like another wave was going to push you even further over, and things were just going flying across the deck. That wasn't so fun. And then there was a time I just called up Mast Approach, so we were heading to Rotterdam, and we were picking up a pilot. We were an hour from the pilot station, and we were just all over the place. Like and it was heavy traffic. The seas were heavy, and suddenly we went up with the wave, and then we crashed down. So it's called pounding, where the bow kind of pounds down, and suddenly a load of alarms were going off, and we were actually on fire. And it like sometimes the alarms go off anyway, like just for one reason or another. But the fire alarm went off, and we're like, oh, okay, let's deal with this one. But all the while, the ship's kind of like all over the place, and suddenly you could see flames coming out of the funnel. The fire was fought, so everything was fine, no injuries, and there was minimal actual damage to the engine room as well, which was great. Obviously, it would have been great not to have happened in the first place, obviously, but like in terms of what the potential situation could have been horrible. Yeah, but fortunately, nothing too bad has ever happened to me. That was probably the worst.
As you've now qualified and you've got your master's certificate, and it's got all these names that don't say captain, but you are somebody who could be a captain of a ship.
Yes.
When you sign paperwork now, do you get to put Captain Heather Enness?
No, not often, because it's one of those that.
Or do you have to actually have a ship before you?
Yeah, no, it depends who you talk to. Like, for instance, I personally wouldn't necessarily wear a rank slide of a job that a rank that I've not sailed in. So, I do have my 4 stripes. I've never sailed as a captain, so I wear my 3 stripes. I have sailed as a chief mate. In theory, I'm allowed to, but it's one of those that you're either in the camp whereby you say, well, I've worked hard to pass my Master Mariner's ticket, so therefore I can wear my captain's rank slides. But then you will always get that chunk of people who say, but you don't have the commander experience, so why are you wearing them? And to be fair, I don't really like confrontation, so I'd rather just, I'd just rather wear my chief mate's stripes, But I'm a member. In fact, I'm a freeman of the Honourable Company of Master Mariners. When I'm there, I'm classed as Captain Heather Enness. Because that's what I am, to them. And I love the Honourable Company of Master Mariners. It's a bit of an old boys club, and that I rock the boat a lot. And people know that, and some people think it's great, some others don't. But again, it's pushing that norm. And that's what the industry's needing, to push that norm. And if I've got to be the person who does that, even if I don't like the limelight, then fine. If it helps someone else along the line, and so that they don't have the difficulties and troubles that I've had, then fine, great. It's doing some positive.
Cool. Oh no, if I had the rank, I'd be like, no, I'm Captain John.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it on my credit card or anything like that.
You've got it.
No. Maybe one day when I actually get the command post, but right now, in being offshore, I won't ever get to that command post.
Do you think it's because like with the American military, they have this thing about like you're a sir, no matter if you're a man or a woman. If you hold a certain rank, you're a sir.
So
how does that work?
A captain is I've often been asked this question. A captain is sometimes referred to as the old man. Okay, so the old man of the ship is the captain. Would I want to be the old woman of the ship? Hell no, I wouldn't want to be the old woman of the ship. I'd rather be the old man. I'm not a man. But it's just maybe it's steeped in tradition. I don't know, but I just don't want to be called the old woman. Do we need to have that term? Maybe not, but I don't know. I guess the sailors, they may well turn around and be like, oh yeah, the old man. Oh, can we call her old man? No, but maybe not. Oh, so it's an interesting one.
I guess it depends on which they like.
Do you know what though? There is a lot with regards to I'm a seaman. I mean, it's a funny word as in itself, I carry around with me a seaman's discharge book, they're funny terms, and, you know, man overboard, manpower, you know, the fact that you've got to grease nipples, you know, like, and you work with flanges, you know, they're all hilarious words. And some women do hate it. And some men try to campaign against things like that. There's a big study whereby, you know, is there a lack of women in the industry because of these, like, it's the whole gender biasing and like the phrasing and the wording that we use within this industry. It does take a certain type of woman to be at sea. It does. I've already touched upon the word resilience, you know, what have you. But you've got to have a laugh with it. You know, if you're so uptight about the fact that it's called man overboard procedures, come on. You know, like, does it really matter? At the end of the day, the word man is in the word woman. You know, mankind doesn't mean that it's men and a male as a gender. It's just a whole thing. And so whenever I see posts on, you know, like the way things are phrased, I have to laugh, because otherwise I'd end up sending a comment being like, get over yourself, you know. And I don't want to be a negative troll or anything like that. I don't even want to be associated with the word troll, you know. And I've certainly done a post in the past because I was about to comment on someone's post being like, what? So I thought, do you know what? No, I won't. I'll do my own post and say, look, you know, don't get me wrong, I can see people's perspective on it, but does it really matter? You know, does it really matter? No, of course it doesn't. It's just a word. Sticks and stones may break my bones and all that kind of good stuff, you know. Just, yeah.
I mean, I think there's an element of language that is important, because language can be harmful. I mean, you know, not to disagree, but
oh, disagree away, you know, like, it's fine,
but
you know.
but you know, the term sticks and stones, let's turn itself off again. The term sticks and stones may break my bones, I kind of find difficult, because words can do a lot of damage.
Words can.
And,
Words can, for sure. And I will always admit that one of my weaknesses is I take comments to heart sometimes. So yeah, words do. But I'm more, in with regards to that, I'm more referring to the fact that, you know, like, people have an issue with the word semen because it has the word men in it, you know. And I'm not, you know, words can be harmful. Of course they can, but
I get it. And the thing is, the Navy does it, like merchant or otherwise, does itself no favours for the level of innuendo in its own language. You know, I get what you're saying.
And this is where I'm coming from. It is the innuendo, but do you know what? Why not have a laugh with it?
Yeah.
Why get so bogged down in the seriousness of it?
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day,
That's
what do you want to do? Do you want to have fun when you're at work, or do you want to be not so fun at work? You know, I'd rather be fun at work. And if it means that I'm taking the mickey out of like a couple of the phrases, like I say, greasy, you know, I've got to go grease the nipples of whatever, you know, it's funny. Why can't it just be funny? Yeah. You know, now touching on what you just said about, you know, how words can affect people. Yeah. And it can throw you into some dark times, you know, especially like if you feel like people don't respect you, or, you know, like it can eat on people's and play on people's minds. And the problem with working at sea is you can't always escape from it. You can't escape from them. You can't escape from the location. You know, you're stuck in a box unless you're in port and you can just go for a run and walk it off. You know, yeah, words can be hurtful, and I've certainly had some. I've certainly caused myself issues because of words, you know. Yeah. So I do say the whole sticks and stones with like massive tongue in cheek, because it all depends on the situation. You know, like, have a laugh with, you know, flanges and semen and stuff. But yeah, no, like when it comes to the personal, being on a ship or a rig, it's not the place to do it, because it can eat you alive. Massively so. Like, literally, I had to send off my seamen's discharge book, and at the post office, they always ask you, can I ask you what's in? Is it a DVD? And I'm like, no. And he was like, I've got to ask for security purposes, what is in the parcel? And I was just like, It's the Seaman's Discharge book, and the look you get, and like there was a couple of what like what is this? What is she saying? It's a what? And but you've got to find it funny.
Yeah.
Why not? Like,
Oh no, I'm bad enough. I joined the Air Force and they pointed at a plane and went, "This part's called the flaps."
yeah, right. You laugh, and yeah, we have like.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I think it's that thing of whether there's malice behind something is what matters, and the fact is that people I can see why it's problematic when words are so heavily masculinized.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that when you're having to say semen all the time, it's just
funny.
do it then.
It's funny though, but I mean, okay, so something that I get quite a lot is whenever you go into an office or you go, someone's got a list of names or something like that, I get a lot, "Oh, you must be Heather." And I was just like, yes, I must be. And and so I just started playing around with it, and it's a little bit immature, and now I'm 35 going on 36. I probably should rein it in a little bit, but this even happened the other day. "Oh, you must be Heather." And I'm like, "Oh, what gave it away? The tits?" And I would say stuff like that. And it takes some people aback. Some people take it in really good humor and just laugh. And it depends who else is in the in the area. But yeah, I even said that the other day. But do you know what? It became a topic of conversation later on in the evening, and and we had a laugh about it. So a massive bigwig talking to me, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know how to react to that." I was just like, "Well, just laugh at it." How else do you want to? It is what it is. And yeah, like I say, I should probably grow up now. But
I don't think it's that. It'd be nice if you stopped doing it because the industry got to a point where you weren't the obviously only woman in the room.
And you know what? He actually said, I understand why you do it. And okay, sometimes it does just roll off the tip of your tongue and you don't mean to say it, but yeah, why should you have it where you're spoken to in a sense that you're being told, "Oh, you must be Heather," because that's the crux of it, isn't it? You don't go down the list and see like a load of guys' names and be like, "Oh, you must be John." Why must I be John? I could be Tom, I could be Edward, I could be Michael. Oh, but you must be Heather because that's the only female name on the list. That's sad, is it not? And I guess that's why I do. I do go speak to a lot of females, and do the whole careers fairs, and and I do quite like going to the all female schools, to do this because they're like, "Oh, okay, oh, and you're a mum too, yeah, oh, you can do that, yeah, you can." Here's a signpost into a potential career in the merchant navy, for sure.
Do you feel a little bit like it's a bit kind of you're kind of put in this position of you have to be an ambassador for this stuff because you are a woman?
Yeah, you often feel like that.
Yeah.
100% often feel like that because it is a case of, "Oh, you're the female within the offshore industry. Do you mind if we get his it's like I was on a 2-day it was actually like an icebreaker team building thing at the start of the week, and they wanted interviews with different people, and of course let's get an array of let's do the whole diversity and inclusion thing. "Oh, Heather, can you just dot. And so yeah, all the time. And I don't want to be anyone's poster girl, especially I've seen a few people get burnt by being the poster girls, and no, I don't want to be that. But equally, I've been on a few like podcasts recently and done like articles for magazines, and it's all off the back of me being a mummy at sea. And yeah, no, I don't want to be anyone's poster girl, but whilst the spotlight's on me and people are listening, would it not be better to try and do good with it? And so I do. I don't necessarily want to. I'm not a confident person when it comes to like speaking publicly or even in interviews, or my writing skills aren't even that good, but I will always make the effort. I will always help someone out if I can. And if they've asked, will you be the person who comes onto this Zoom with 20 female cadets, like to listen to you and to ask questions to you? Hell yeah, I will. Because I was that female cadet and I had the same concerns that they had. And so if I can impart a little bit of my knowledge and, dare I say, wisdom, then yeah, I'd like to.
what has been the hardest part of being at sea? Not even as a woman, just in general as a person. What have you found most challenging, and what's like brought you to the maybe to the point of being like, I'm not sure I can do this. You know?
Oh, do you know what? There's so many different elements there. As a female cadet, and not necessarily female, boys get it as well, male cadets get it as well. But as a female cadet, you're quite vulnerable, especially if it's your first time at sea. You know you don't know who you're going to meet, you don't know what people are like, you don't know the ship, you don't know the industry. You're going in blind almost, unless you know someone on there, or you've been somewhere before, the people know you, then it can be difficult. Um, there can be a lot of workplace harassment, bullying, and again, it's not just for females; it can be for males as well. And it's horrible what some people go through. I mean, at the extreme, we're talking rape here. You know, um, it's not nice what some people have been through, and some people can't talk about it. Some people won't talk about it. Some people want to talk about it, but they don't know who to talk about it to. Um, some of the stories are just brutal. I myself have been through some difficult times on board. I've been harassed. I've woken up in the middle of the night to find someone sat next to my bed. I've gone back to my cabin to find that someone has locked it because they weren't happy that I hadn't just gone to my cabin, that I'd gone to the bar instead. I've been stalked on board. I've had 1 week into a 4-month trip, I had a Russian officer tell me that he loved me. And I then had, 3 months, 3 weeks still to have to deal with him. And that was difficult. That was difficult because he was the one who would lock me out of my cabin because he saw me talking to the third engineer or the second the third officer. Like, he wouldn't be happy if I'd gone to the bar after watch instead of going just straight to bed, and he would check on me. Like, I'd come back to my cabin to find that he'd been in my cabin, written all over my walls, Schmala Cadetta, I love you, and you're just like, what do I do about it? It was hard to talk about it because I really, really wanted to be on that trip. If I spoke to the captain, who would they get rid of? The second officer who's been there for years, or the female cadet who is now causing a problem? They'd get rid of the female cadet every single time. And I really wanted to be on that trip. That trip was such a great trip for the fact that it was basically circumnavigating the globe. I got to go to so many places and see so many things and so many different cargoes getting loaded. And it was a ro-ro general cargo vessel. So we had 5 cranes lifting bulks on, and like containers. There was containers on board. There was, you had your bulks down in the holds. You had vehicles coming up on the ramps. So it was an amazing vessel to see different styles of cargo. And again, with the travel, I really wanted to be on that trip. So I put up with the crap that I had to deal with. I didn't really have anyone else to talk to. There was only 3 British officers on board. One was the purser, one was the chief engineer, and one was the captain. The captain was very much of an old school kind of like mentality. You're there to be seen, not heard. You couldn't ask questions, or if you did, you had to pick and choose your time. He didn't really speak to the cadet because the cadet was to speak to the chief officer instead. But the chief officer's English was not very good. The chief engineer was great, but he was a different department. And then the purser, yeah, again, different department. So, and they just weren't approachable people. What this job has taught me is that it doesn't matter whether you have bad experiences or good experiences, or whether you sail with great people or awful people. All of these different elements makes you become the person you want to be I know that I don't want to be a captain like that. I want to have an open door policy. I want the cadet or the chief officer or anybody on the ship to come and be free, feel free like that. They can talk to me, especially the cadets, especially the female cadets. Blimey, you know, yeah, it molds the person you become. And I will, as much as I didn't like some of those situations that I was in, they make you who you are today. It makes you resilient. It shouldn't be a word that you've got to use, but unfortunately it is, you know. And but it's not just this industry, you know, like other industries, you know, you have your workplace bullying and harassment. The only difference is we're confined to a box, and you don't always have the opportunity to call home or just walk away from it all because you are confined to this box. But there are charities out there and organisations that are trying to tell cadets and all officers, you know, we're here to talk to you, we're here to listen, we're here to help. And those are so important. Like, for instance, safer waves, you know, they are designed so that people can talk up and get the help that they need. Obviously you'd like it to never happen, but it happens, because especially when there's, you know, males, females, or any gender for that matter, you know, like different cultures, different strength levels. You know, if you've got quite an imposing guy who's been away at sea for 3 months, not seen his wife, whatever, you know, like, what's he going to do? And, you know, you'd hope that it never happens. Unfortunately, it does.
You talk about there being different cultures and different nations, and obviously maritime law is quite its own complex thing. What does happen when it comes to things like that? It's like you're on a ship that's somewhere around the equator. Obviously, British law is going to struggle to be involved. What's the story with that? How does that work?
I mean, in terms of the legalities, I'm not 100% sure. Hopefully you can talk to your captain or whoever you feel comfortable talking to, and chances are, though, it's gonna be you who gets off. You know, how's that fair? I don't know, but it's not. But obviously there'll be a disciplinary, like, happen, I guess. You know, especially if you do raise it with the captain, you know, the captain's got to take it seriously. They've got to put it in the official logbook. They've got to follow some sort of the code of conduct. You know, a lot of companies obviously do have policies in place, and so hopefully one of those may well cover, you know, what to do in the action of ... You know, there was a massive, in fact, I think it's still going on, the massive case in the UK, not in the UK, sorry, in the US, you know, what do they call her, Midshipman X or something like that, and actually one of the females did openly say, look, this is me, this is my face, this is my name, this happened to me. And that, I think, you know, that was with quite a big company, you know, a well-known company, you know, like, reputable company, and yet there was people on that ship that weren't reputable, you know, like, and caused their life hell. So but they are opening up about it, and off the back of that, more and more people are opening up and coming to terms with the fact that happened. Yeah, I know a few. I've been one. I've never been raped, you know, but I've certainly had my fair dealings of crap on board ship. So
What do you think women bring to merchant navy, to shipping, that men don't necessarily create in that workspace?
So for me, I'm going to go down the personal route, rather than your ability within and your knowledge set, because you're all trained to do the same thing. You know, like, in theory, you know, you should be doing the same job and what have you. But what a female does bring to the table is the fact that it creates a more well-rounded atmosphere. Females have a softer touch, and even though the industry doesn't necessarily need that, I think emotionally for people who are confined to a box, it works. For instance, like several ships that I've been on, my crew has become my family. You're with them 50% of the year. You're with them just as much, if not more, than some of your own family and friends. It's inevitable that you create this bond, and like I'm often seen as someone's little sister. I often see some of the guys as my older brother or my uncle, or you're just like a dad to me, because that's what happens. You work so close with people that inevitably, you're going to get to know about their family life. Like what their children's names are, that what their wife's name is. That they're going to Disneyland on a big family holiday, for instance. And you start having those more personal conversations. Now, men can't always talk to men, but men do find it easier to open up to women sometimes, especially if you're engaged with them, if you're listening in. And I like to do that. I'm an inclusive person. I can always tell when someone's down or if they just need to talk. And, I'll always offer them a cup of tea, no matter whether it's the AB or whether it's some bigwig from the company or even the offshore installation manager. Like I will always ask, I'm putting the kettle on, does anyone want a brew? And just that act of asking and being inclusive, suddenly changes the atmosphere. Like I often get in my appraisals, it's been a breath of fresh air having you here. You're smiley, you're bubbly, like you talk to everyone, you're friendly, and like you've just created this different atmosphere on board. And I believe that majority of females are probably similar to me. Maybe not quite, my level of friendliness, like happiness, but that's what it brings. And I think people like that, like crews like that, because otherwise it can get stale, like a room full, a box full of guys who, won't talk to each other. They just squirrel themselves away, it can be quite lonely because everyone's in the same boat, so to speak, excuse the pun. You're away from family and friends. You don't necessarily want to be away. You might be missing your son's birthday. You might be missing a big assembly that your daughter is doing a performance in. You might be missing someone's wedding. You miss a lot of things, Christmas, New Year, and so when you are all in the same boat, you kind of, it's nicer to make it a better atmosphere. You don't want the morale sucked out of everything, and you don't want that negativity. So certainly I try to bring the positivity. So the Merchant Navy Medal for Meritorious Service, yeah, it's a medal, that I was nominated for. I don't feel worthy of, if I'm honest, but someone did, and the board and panel agreed that I was worthy of it. So up to 20 awards, medals get given out a year, and I was one who was awarded it in 2022. For my service to diversity at sea and inclusion, and basically my advocacy for women at sea, careers at sea in general. And I get asked all the time, like, what did you get it for? Why did you get it? And I don't really like answering that question because it then makes me have to big myself up, and I'm not really one for doing that. Like I don't. It's unnatural. I mean, not for some people, of course, but on a whole, it's quite unnatural to be like, oh, look at me, I'm the great I am. This is why I got my medal. But I spend a lot of time either doing voluntary work or just sitting with someone, like whether that's on Zoom or in person, and just talking to them, bouncing questions their way. So for cadets, for instance, they've got a big exam coming up. I've been through that. I've failed that several times, actually. So I know the pressure that they're putting themselves under. And, I'm a familiar face to them, or I'm like a kind face that, I can ask these questions to them, and so I don't, I'm not tutoring them or anything like that, but I will ask them questions that they may well get in their exam and getting them to verbalize things. So I spend a lot of time doing that. But also I go to schools. I do careers fairs. I do mock interviews. I volunteer that time to do that because when I wanted to join the Royal Navy, I didn't know what the Merchant Navy was. I never knew what the Merchant Navy was, especially living here in the Midlands. Um, so I like to go to schools to say, look, the Merchant Navy is actually a great career. I know you might not have heard about it, but everyone's heard of the Royal Navy. You know, the Merchant Navy. Okay, it's not military, but it's not too dissimilar. It's a job at sea. You know, it's getting your Xboxes from China to the UK. It's your Aunt Sally going on her Mediterranean cruise. Those ships need people to work on them. You know, so even if they don't want to be a captain or an engineer, you know, they might be like, do you know what, I just want to spend a couple of years being a barmaid. Go be a barmaid on board a ship. Why not? You can do that on a ferry or on a cruise ship. You might sail the world. You know, like you just need a few basic, you know, like seafaring qualifications, but there's the option there. You know, like, or I want to be a hairdresser. I don't want to be in the Merchant Navy. Why? You could be both. You know, again, cruise ships have salons on them. They have childcare on them. They have dancers, musicians. You know, they have all of these roles that you could do. And even though per se it's not your stereotypical merchant ship navy job, like a captain working towards a captain or working towards being a chief engineer, you know, they might want to be a cook. Okay, well, why be a cook in a busy restaurant working your ass off when you could work on a ship? You're still working your ass off, but you know, like at least it's structured, and then you get your time off. You know, whereas a chef in a restaurant or a gastropub or something, they're just non-stop working. You know, so the jobs are there. It's just people don't know about it, and so I go out, as do many other ambassadors. You know, I'm not just a sole trader here. You know, like there's many people who want to spread the word of the Merchant Navy because it is such an amazing career if you want it to be. And so my medal, I guess people, you know, like the people who like nominated me and like backed that spotlight that up, they could see how much I was working with cadets to help with them, you know, with their rules, or just being a listening ear. They could see that I was spreading the word of the Merchant Navy to schools. And, you know, I push hard to try and raise the awareness for females. You know, this is a job that you can do, and you don't have to stop just because you've got a family. You know, like I am Mummy at Sea on Instagram. People know that. I went on the protest and they were like, Mummy at Sea. And I'm like, holy crap, why do you know my name? You know, like, how do you know my Instagram handle? You know, like, and they'd be like, Heather Enness. And I'd be like, yeah. And again, like I said to you, I don't mean to be a role model. It's just for my girls that I do that. But if it drags other people in and that it inspires them, then I'm doing something right. And I'm happy with that.